This week on Off the Air, Brian Clark.
So without further ado, Brian Clark joins us now on Off the Air. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time. How's everything going?
Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me in this crazy year.
It certainly has been a crazy year. And before we get into anything, obviously a wild few months it's been with the coronavirus and everything that's gone on over these last 6 or so months. What's life been like for you during quarantine? How you've been able to handle everything that's been thrown at you over these last few months?
It's been challenging, but at the same time, it's also, a time I think just to kind of lock in how fortunate, at least I am, because my family's healthy. My wife and I are actually expecting a baby in a couple of weeks, so we're really excited for that. And we've been able to stay home. I mean, you're not going anywhere, so just be able to be together. I've been fortunate to still be working, and I know there are millions of people who have had a far more difficult situation than me. So being able to keep that perspective has been something that kind of just gets you through up days and down days.
Well, the reason you're here, obviously, an FUV and Fordham alum. When you got to Fordham at 18 years old, how quickly did you know FUV was the place? Did you come in knowing? Was it something you figured out? How was that process?
Backtracking. I mean, I kind of went to Fordham for FUV. I mean, there were other things about Fordham that were really attractive to me, but it was a main thing, a main draw, and just seeing the names of the people that had come through FUV. And when I was applying to college, I think it was right when Spiro Ditas had gotten the Lakers play-by-play job and he graduated college, I think, 4 years earlier. So, I mean, you see in the paper, you read in the Post that this guy who's not much older than you is getting that job. You think, whoa, obviously he's an extraordinarily talented broadcaster, but something went right in his development. So it was a big reason why I chose Fordham. So, yeah, first day I was on campus, I walked into the radio station.
Brian, we can't mention WFUV without mentioning Bob Ahrens. And Bob, for anyone who's met him, has certainly been an inspiration for people who have been through FUV and just been in this field in general. What was your first encounter like with Bob Ahrens, and how much has he influenced what you've done in your career so far?
It's funny. I just said first day I walked into the radio station. It was actually before that summer going into my freshman year. I'd actually emailed Bob, or I'd called him in these prehistoric days. And he said, sure, come in. And so I was able to sit down with him, and he gave me the usual spiel about what it is they do at WFUV and how the process works. So it was just early on, you could tell, I think he could tell that I really wanted to do this, that I was serious about this. And it's just, as I look back now with the benefit of some time between that, just the appreciation for somebody who's willing to put that much time above and beyond his normal 9 to 5 or 10 to 8 job, whatever hours he would work that were crazy. He would go above and beyond for a group of college kids is incredible. I mean, that's like a once in a lifetime gift. And I think every day that passes and every day that I'm fortunate to work in this industry, you realize how fortunate you are to have that kind of gift and that kind of care from somebody who's looking out for you.
Speaking of, Bob and your development, when was really the moment at FUV, if there was, where when you realized that this is something you could do? You were talented enough, you had the drive to do this for a career.
Good question. I remember the time I didn't think. It was the first football game I ever did a demo. I'll never forget this. It was against Duquesne. And it was before they renovated the press box at Jack Coffey Field. It was just a little bit more simple. They've divided up now to fancy booths and stuff. So we'd be on the roof. So we were outdoor. And I remember my first football game, I definitely prepared. Like, I wasn't not prepared, but I just wasn't ready for like the speed of it. And, there's 22 guys on the field with all the different numbers. And I remember, I think I lost my voice. And I remember walking, I was like, maybe I should go look into a different line of work, because this is not really going great for me. But I was able to get back on the horse. I did a few more football games that fall, so those were better. And then I did a ton of basketball games, like demos that first, like my freshman year, men and women, like any opportunity, I did it, usually with Justin Shackle, who was a year ahead of me. He's a good friend of mine to this day. And we did a ton. And doing basketball, by no means was I great or good even that first year, but just being able to get down the mechanics, get down the rhythm. I was like, okay, I can do this. Certainly there's work to be done, but that was helpful. And then just being on air with the sportscasts, the one-on-one updates, just talking into a microphone. It's, I'm going to quote Bob here, it's reps. Like, that's all it is. The more you do it, the better you're going to be at it. So once you get a few under your belt and you get the hang of it, then you can work on the fine-tuning of pacing, your voice, and just those little things that go from, competent to making it sound good and better.
Brian, we can't go without mentioning Bob, without asking you for a Bob Ahrens story, because it seems like everyone has them, whether it involves listening to demos or his driving or anything involving that. Is there a Bob Ahrens story that sticks out in your mind when you think back on your time at WFUV?
Too many. But they're all so great and they're all so unique. I actually think I avoided ever driving with Bob. I don't think I was.
Wow.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I've heard, but I don't. I've ever been in a car with him. I don't know if this story has been told. I know you guys had some alums on the podcast, but my freshman year, he turned 70, and Brian McFadden, who I think was he was the assistant or the sports manager at the time. He was just a great, just kind of wise guy. I mean, he's a super smart guy. He's a great guy. But we had a birthday party for Bob off at somebody's apartment off campus, and Brian made a bunch of Ahrens 316 T-shirts, like Austin 316. And one of my great regrets is that I no longer have this T-shirt. But that was super, and that kind of speaks to just the family vibe that existed there. Bob's listening to the demo, and then all of a sudden he starts kind of nodding off, and you notice that you're in this office with this guy who is nodding off because he's been at work probably for 12 hours. So I would always just there were the controls for the audio on the board right next to me. So you just take it and you do the quick spike, and then he jolts up. That was my tried and true method for keeping him alert. So yeah, those it's just too many accounts. It's just, they're all happy memories. Like, as much as you laugh and joke about them now, it's like you just realize how much of a special time in your life that was.
In your play-by-play experience at Fordham, is there one game, one play, one player even that sticks out to this day as that was a really special moment for me, something I'm always going to remember?
I did a lot of really not good games. Like, teams were just, this was before Stephanie Gately arrived in women's basketball and has turned that program into, the powerhouse of the A-10. So the women's team was kind of in some downtimes. The men were up and down a little bit. They had a rough senior year, my senior year. So a lot of does it have to be play-by-play?
No.
So I'll give you one. So I lived across the hall my freshman year and sophomore year, ironically, from John Skelton, who went on to the NFL. With the Arizona Cardinals. And my sophomore year, the football team won the Patriot League. And it was one of the first league games. And doing the non-conference games, being around the non-conference games, it was like, wow, this team is really good. But how's it going to look in the Patriot League? And so we went out to Lafayette. And Lafayette, they've got that gorgeous stadium. They were one of the powerhouses of the league at the time. I think they were the defending champions. And I was a sideline reporter. And Fordham just punched them in the mouth. And being on the sideline for that, Ryan Rucco was doing play-by-play. And being a part of that game, that was a really cool experience. Just and there was that sense on the sideline, like, hey, this is a good team. Like, we belong here. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we're beating Lafayette. It was like, yeah, we expected to win this game. And we're taking it to them. So that was a cool thing to be part of. And it was really cool just to be around John during his process. I would say my favorite thing that I did at WFUV, and apologies for taking one of your questions, my senior year, and this was kind of Bob's idea actually, I sort of followed John Skelton as he went through the NFL draft process. He got invited to the Combine that year. He was working out for teams. So we would do like a weekly segment on one-on-one where I would sit down with John, not live, but I would sit down during the week and produce a piece. And it was super cool. Like, just being able to, he was my age, but he's got the greatest job interview on a process of all time. So that was something really cool. And I remember the day of the draft, he was picked. I think this was the first year Yeah, this might have been the first year where they started doing the Thursday first round. Yeah, that would make sense. And he was picked on Saturday. I think he was a 4th round pick. So he was out obviously with family and friends, but not long after he was picked, he called in a one-on-one, and Bob had me hosting it that day because we knew this could happen. So being able to talk to John right after that, it was a really cool process, and it was that was just a fun project to handle.
Brian, you mentioned before so many people that have been through WFUV, and the alum list just goes on and on and on. Whether it be one of those guys or someone non-even FUV related, who are the people that you looked up to as an aspiring broadcaster growing up that really made you interested in pursuing this career path?
So growing up in New Jersey, I would say the list probably starts with Ian Eagle, like watching Nets games, and he's so talented. And I've been fortunate. He's somebody I've gotten to know. He's just a super person, and he's given me a ton of advice over the years. So he's high on that list. Again, growing up in New York, Bob Papa, just listening. I was a Giants fan. I actually didn't like the Yankees growing up, so I didn't watch a ton of Yankees games, but yeah, obviously I knew who Michael Kay was. I would say I listened to more Nets games, just being on the radio, like listening to WFAN and all that. So I really enjoyed listening to Gary Cohn and then later Howie Rose. But I would say somebody who goes outside that window a little bit. I know I talked about Spiro Ditas earlier, but somebody about Spiro's age. So I do a lot of work now in news. I work at ABC News, and Connell McShane worked at WFUV Sports. He was when Bob first arrived, and he now works at Fox Business. So I've been able to speak with him a few times just about the news side of things, and having somebody who has had a lot of success in that side is certainly somebody that, you know, it's another example of, hey, there's somebody who went through what I'm doing and he's now at this point. That's encouraging. So he's high on that list for me right now.
Speaking about what you're doing now in your career, you're working with the Yankees, the scoreboard host and reporter with the Yankees, alongside FUV alums, as you mentioned earlier, Justin Shackle and Ryan Rucco. What's that like, not only being with those guys, but being with the Yankees, and how did that come about?
It's been a blast. I've done it, so 2017, 2019, then obviously this year with no fans. We're not doing it, which was obviously disappointing. It was just – I was fortunate. I got called, Justin put in a word for me. Greg Colello, who is in charge of the scoreboard there, he's an FUV alum. I didn't know Greg when we were apparently on campus at the same time, but I did not know him. So I got called into audition, and then I was told I got the job. So it was a blast. So I did it. 2017 was my first year, and that was such a fun year for the Yankees with Aaron Judge with a rookie home run record, Game 7 of the ALCS. So that was a blast, and it's just really fun. I mean, who doesn't love going to a ballpark every day? And yes, it's work, but it's work that you're really lucky to do and lucky to be a part of, and it's just a fun place to be. The old cliche is so true that you never know what you're going to see when you show up at the stadium each day. So that's been a whole lot of fun, and hoping that we can get some normalcy back there in 2021.
Brian, you're also right now you're doing the U.S. Open, calling it on radio, and you've been doing that for a long time now. Just curious, what got you into tennis radio, and that's something that was that something that's always been a passion of yours in terms of watching tennis, or how is that something that developed kind of once you got to college? What was the path to get to where you are today in terms of that aspect of it?
So I've always liked tennis. I've always kind of played it badly. Like I didn't even play in high school, but just hitting around the park. But always liked watching it on TV. And so I covered it at WFUV like you guys have. I know I've seen you out there before, Jackson. After I graduated, I needed a job. And here's a good story. So right after I graduated, I, again, needed a job. This was 2010, so the market wasn't exactly booming. I got a job in my hometown just delivering pizzas just to put some cash in my pocket. And I remember one day I was wearing a Fordham t-shirt, and a guy came in and said, "Oh, my daughter is going to Fordham." I said, "Oh, I just graduated," and just this look of horror on his face that I now was not able to find a job. No disrespect to anybody who's in that work. I mean, it's work, but it's worked out.
We get the point.
Exactly. So after that, I was able to – there was a position that Justin had done, Greg Jamborisi had done it, where you were sort of a studio producer for U.S. Open Radio, but you would be able to get some time on air Bob was able to set this up with a guy who ran the show at the time named Brian Beglane from the USTA. And I got a couple of on-air opportunities that first year. Brian liked me, brought me back for a second year for a little bit more of a role. And that role's just kind of grown each year. I've been super happy about it. The last couple of years, I've also done some of the World Feed TV matches. And it has grown into a thing that I didn't ever see coming. And yeah, it's tennis. But last year, 2019, the ATP now has a radio channel, the men's tour. So I did 4 of the Masters events. We do all 9, but I did 4 of them. I did the Australian Open last year. That was really cool. And so it's something I've grown, and hopefully I can keep growing in, because, a benefit of tennis is it's year round, and it's to its detriment at times to the players, because the off season is about 3 weeks, but there's usually always something going on. So it's been a lot of fun just to see the sport grow globally. I mean, it's such a huge popular sport worldwide, and to have that international side of things, it's been a blast to be a very small part of it.
So following up on that, I'm curious what your first experience was like calling tennis on the radio, because it's obviously such a different experience than calling basketball, football, or any of the main sports, given that just such a different style and such a different approach when you're playing tennis. What was that experience like for you? Was it a rocky start? Was it fun right away? What was that experience for you?
All the above. I think I remember the best advice I ever got was from an anonymous guy who either tweeted, or you used to be able to email us in the booth that first year. And this guy got in touch with me and he said, "You're doing this wrong." He goes, "You're doing this with the cadence of a baseball game." Like, I was very casually like, forehand into a backhand, now back into a forehand, and like just that. And the guy's like, "No, like that's the exciting stuff. You have to like, these shots are really hard to hit. You have like, the drama needs to be there." I don't know who this person is, but whoever you are, thank you immensely, because that flipped the switch. So that was, I would say that's the one biggest bump I remember early on. And so that was a rocky start, but I think I've been able to grow with it a little bit, and now I really enjoy it.
Obviously, tennis is a sport you're doing now. You've grown into being fantastic at it, but what's your favorite sport to do play-by-play in? You obviously do football and basketball at Fordham, tennis now, but what's that one that you find the most fun?
I would say still baseball, just because it's the original play-by-play sport. So I did the Chatham A's, now the Chatham Anglers, in the Cape League in the summer going to my junior and senior year with Dan Duva, another WFUV alum who's now with the Vegas Golden Knights. And doing that was awesome. I mean, just day in, day out baseball. I never did, my path a little bit different. I never did the minor league baseball, go away somewhere for a summer. I never did that. I wanted to stay here. Part of me always wishes I had done that, but I don't know how things would have been different, if they would have been different at all. You never know those things. So I really like doing baseball, but I like doing tennis a lot. So I would say those two are my favorite. Tennis, because it's a combination of weaving it all together. Like, there's so many forehand, backhand. It's a challenge to come up with new ways to describe it. It's a challenge to weave in stories from the broader context of the tournament. You don't have to lock in on every point. Yeah, in a big match you're going to, in a big moment. But, early in the second set, you can kind of scan other things that are going on. You can still be conversational. So in that way, I think I've almost made that into like broadcasting baseball.
Obviously, when people think of FUV, or the people who have been in FUV, they think of it as a fraternity. And just with so many of the classmates you stay in touch with, you stay friends with, who are the classmates specifically that stick out to you and that you're still friends with and big-time friends with today?
Like I said, Justin Shackle, who's a year ahead of me, is one of my best friends to this day. Still good friends with Ryan Rucco, Lou Baraselli, Bobby Coyle. We have a fun group. We all get together every year, and we go out to dinner around Christmas. We also had Tim Bassett. He doesn't work in the industry, but he was a WFUV guy. Greg Jambrisi, who I just mentioned, and Brian McFadden. We go out to dinner every year around the holidays with Bob and Joe DeBarry, and that's been like a fun tradition that we've built over the last 10 years. I think I said Lou Baraselli. He'd be mad at me if I didn't. He'd also be happy if I said him twice. So either way, we're covered there. That's been really fun. My year, Greg Caserta is a friend of mine. He does the Reading Fightins, minor league baseball play-by-play. He's very good at baseball play-by-play. He was fortunate my senior year. You asked me what I was remembering, like my best game that I called. And I remember always missing the good games. And the best example of that, our senior year, there was a baseball game and Greg was calling it. I was not. And the Fordham runner, I forget who it was, he was trying to score from, let's say, second on a base hit. And he literally did like a front flip over the catcher and landed on the plate. It was on like the Today Show, Sports Center, all that. And Greg did play-by-play for that. So that, I remember, like, those are the things, like, yeah, that was a really cool moment, but I wasn't part of it. But Greg did that. Greg's a friend. Alex Middlesworth he did a lot of color my year. He's a character. He's a really good guy. Dan Obermuller was my year. Mike Palladino, Casey Hunt, just really good people. You stay in touch with it kind of varying degrees, but anytime you see them, it's like you pick up right where you left off.
How much fun has it been, doing the U.S. Open, not only because it's the U.S. Open, you're from New Jersey, but seeing all the FUV guys like Jackson last year come through and be able to connect with them when they're there?
It's been a blast. I mean, it's because I think we all realize it's one of the more fun events at WFUV to cover. I think everybody has appreciated that because of the food, but the tennis is also pretty good. It's awesome just seeing all these familiar faces. And it's really cool when you see them after they're at WFUV and they're working there in different roles, like somebody's there covering it for this outlet or that outlet, and just being able, we always say it's like going to camp, like you're there for 2 weeks, but it's kind of 2 weeks. You see a lot of the same faces. Oh, how's your year been? Those conversations, of course, different this year. It's just awesome. It's one of the things that makes WFUV.
Can attest to that. It is arguably the best experience you will have at WFUV Sports, and would highly recommend it to anyone who comes through here. Brian, just one more before we let you go. Obviously, so much has happened over the last year, really, and I want your advice on this for incoming freshmen who may be taking a step into the door at WFUV Sports. What would be your advice to a freshman student walking on the campus of Fordham University who wants to get involved in WFUV Sports? What would be your advice to them in what to do over their 4 years at WFUV?
Everything. I mean, try everything. And unless you have like a legitimate like academic conflict or a family conflict, don't say no. Like, accept every assignment. We talked about it earlier. The more you do, the better you're going to be at everything. So if you're serious about this is something you really want to pursue, there's no way you're not going to just magically wake up one day and be able to do it or be in the right position for a job. Do everything possible. Go to every workshop. I mean, that's such a tremendous thing when I was at WFUV, just being able to talk to, prominent names in the industry. So many people I had just named had come and spoken to us at WFUV, and just being able to pick their brains and in some cases stay in touch with them after. If you see somebody in the field, don't be shy about I know it's hard. It's weird to say this. Just introduce yourself, obviously in an appropriate moment, but people notice these things. You'll notice that a young guy is able to have the confidence to go up and say, hi, and I'm so-and-so from WFUV. WFUV is going to make the ears perk up because it's going to signal that, hey, this is a kid who's serious about, or a young person that's serious about what they want to do. And they're out here. They're professionals. It's huge. I mean, that's what I would say is best. Don't turn anything down. Try everything. Good example. I hosted one-on-one, and I realized I didn't really love hosting a talk show, but being on air for 3 hours in a week is only going to make you better. It's going to make you be able to improv. My job now, and here's another piece of advice, be aware of everything. So I work in news now. I work, there's all these different technologies. If you told me when I arrived at WFUV, I'd be doing a Zoom podcast, I would say, what? Like that didn't exist. I mean, podcasts were kind of in their infancy, certainly not to what they are now. Be aware of technology and social media. Be smart about social media. Don't say anything that you wouldn't say to somebody in person. Don't just be smart about it, essentially. And just never look under every stone. Like I am at at ABC, and I think I've been told that working in sports is good for news because you're always able to ad lib. You don't need a hard script right in front of you, and I've experienced that on several occasions. So just be curious, look into everything, don't turn anything down, and just try to have fun and realize, as you say, this is for somebody walking in the door at WFUV. These are going to be some of the best years of your lives, certainly the most formative, and take full advantage of it.
Really awesome insight and advice from Brian Clark, who's one of the big up-and-coming names in this industry. Brian, thank you so much again for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and best of luck with the rest of the U.S. Open and everything else to come.
Thanks, Jackson. Thanks, Chris. Best of luck with school and WFUV this year. I know it's going to be a challenging year, but you guys will be all the better for it.
Thanks a lot, Brian.